All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Elise Randolph. I'm welcoming you all to our Talking Stations after show. I'm here with Araya, McLeod, Dr. Spodumane, and Matterall is somewhere in the corner over there typing up questions and reading chat. We're here to summarize and break down a little bit of what you just saw with CZP's wonderful presentation on the server status update. It was really nice to see, and it's kind of something that you would see at FanFest, which tragically we haven't been able to go to. But it was technical at times, so we're going to try and summarize and break down a few things, and ask some questions from our experts out here to see what happens. We'll be chatting if you guys are interested about the drone changes and other news related items later today on our daily show with Matterall. So don't worry about that. We'll cover that later. So you don't need to freak out. So yeah, I'll jump right in, guys. What did you think of the presentation?
I thought it was great. I really appreciate the technical presentations. I don't think we get enough of them. So it was really nice for them to break down what they've been doing with the Eve cluster and how this affects how we play the game.
I think there's a lot of people who don't quite understand how Eve's put together, and they kind of have this sort of like pseudo idea as to how the servers run, how the clients run, how they interact, and it's kind of nice to have these particular streams and presentations by CCP in order to actually get people or more of the people up to sort of speed as to how the client and the server interacts and how the server is kind of set up, because it really is a special thing. It's a very unique thing.
I'll just kind of highlight a few moments here that stood out for me. I'm not tech savvy at all, so a lot of the tech stuff went over my head or just right through me, as I'm quite transparent right now. But what some of the interesting things that they talked about was the bounty calls, right? So CCP saw from the CSM and from the players during the large fleet fights, these bounty call notifications just hang in there, sometimes for upwards of 40 minutes. So they're like, you know what? Let's just turn that off. Let's just see what happens if we turn it off. So they did that, and they recorded the data on it. And according to CCP Paradox, he said it was kind of like a bit of a placebo, right? So it didn't actually do all that much. It did reduce the amount of calls, and I'm not sure exactly what the calls were. And while it may have looked dramatic, it was nowhere near as significant as some of the other optimization changes they did, and it actually didn't affect CPU performance at all. So that's one of the big things that they talked about. I thought was quite interesting. I'm glad that CCP are willing to turn on and off these switches just to see what happens. Another one that they talked about, which I think will be hugely important to some players, is that they improved how essentially they improved how bosuns work, right? The Titan super weapon.
Yeah.
Earlier this, I guess it was last month, there was an attempt with like 4,000 people in local to do a really cool boson trap. The Imperium had logged in like 16 Titans, where the Pappy forces had come in. They tried to like do this cool, intricate boson trap to nuke them all at once. It didn't work. A lot of the supers didn't take a lot of damage. Some of that's reduced, came to range, but some of that came to lag as well. So CCP Paradox said, we saw some critical points of failure. He was crucial to point out that they had existed since 2016. So they've been in there for quite some time, and it's something that wasn't new or anything. But they improved that specifically. Other things might break because they don't get the same testing environment that the players throw stuff into, which, it's just a thing that we'll have to do. We'll just have to get someone to try and kill a whole bunch of supers in one go again. Fingers crossed, because I was rooting for it. Shout out to Hippo Jax. And the last one that I want to talk about before I unleash to you guys here, this is just some of the summary here. Again, this is from CCP Paradox, though everyone else was quite chatty. Players asked a question about like some weapon systems that create a lot of lag, and he goes, yeah, okay. I'm paraphrasing for him. Smart bombs are known to do this. CCP Habakkuk, who's on QA, was like going through trying to find some needles in a haystack, and he mentioned that or not CCP Paradox, CCP Cognac made some optimizations to how smart bombs work, and they expect huge things. They didn't want to go out and say, "Yo, you can smart bomb all you want, chemo fleet go." But basically, I was reading between the lines. That's exactly what they were saying. You can just smart bomb to your heart's content, and it'll work. So that's coming in the December release. That's literally 2 weeks away. So I'm super stoked about that.
That's really, really good. That's a really good change. Sorry, I just interjecting that.
Yeah. So that's it for my summary. I'm sure I missed some parts. What did you guys like? What were like the big key features that you guys took away from that?
I think, like, if I'm going to quickly come in here, I think that boson change, like, actually, CCP coming out and actually saying yes, there was a technical issue there, rather than just being silent about it and having, you know, the players essentially, you know, essentially make up kind of all sorts of different claims, counterclaims, and all sorts of different types of all sorts of different types of propaganda regarding that particular situation that occurred is actually really good, because it kind of clears the air a little bit in terms of like what actually went down specifically there, which is quite nice.
Yeah, on the weapon systems, some great tidbits in there. They did mention missiles take up more server resources than, say, guns or lasers. And in chat, they mentioned that if you group your missiles together, the game tracks that as one big missile, as opposed to eight or six or four separate missiles. So it's less load on the server if you're grouping your missile launchers. They also talked about drones having additional processing on the server, and fighters having even more than drones due to their additional mechanics.
I think a lot of people probably would have been able to determine that, at least in terms of fighters versus like other weapon systems. Maybe drones a little bit less so, but you know, all of the fights, all of the big fights where people drop, like, you know, mass amounts of fighters, like, you know, we as players kind of sort of see the experience degrade quite significantly with the server trying to catch up with all of that kind of processing going on. So yeah, like, that's kind of understandable. I did wonder, because like I know that there are some people who ungroup guns, ungroup missiles sometimes, in order to essentially think that they'll get a better roll to get more critical hits or get more wrecking shots, that kind of thing. I'm not sure whether that is true. You know, in a large load sense, I think if anything, it's probably going to hinder you more than grouping guns and grouping missile launchers. We do have some CCPs in chat here, which is also fantastic, and they can kind of clear up some of these, you know, these additional questions that people might have and that we might bring up, which would be really fantastic if you guys could. But yeah. Anybody else got any additional thoughts?
I just want to jump in real quick. Susie Habakkuk, who is actually watching, hey, thanks for everything. He wants to clarify something that that I attributed to him that he doesn't want associated. He says smart bombs will still be performance-heavy weapon systems. We only fixed one specific bottleneck with very many smart bombs at the same time. Which that's great. That's what I was talking about. Just go in and smart bomb everyone. Yeah.
That is good, because because if anything, smart bombs is one of those things where, you know, you can basically affect a lot of areas, a lot of people in a particular area with one specific system. Sometimes people would consider that to be excessive when used irresponsibly, but I think in most of the fleet fights and larger fleet fights that you see, there's very little situations where, you know, people are actually using those weapon systems irresponsibly. You know, obviously people are going to kind of bring up examples where maybe, you know, a little bit of irresponsible use, but it's never just one side, and it's never, you know, the entirety of the situation. Massed smart bombs in large fleet fights, for example, like, they are very much like a response to dealing with large amounts of enemies.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like there are a lot of practical uses for them too. Like I know in some of the big Keep Star fights, there was a smart bombing practice in like every fleet. I was like, hey, if you're in a capsule, warp here, so you don't have to worry about anything. We'll just go and nuke you as soon as you land, so you can get back into the fight quicker. One of the more interesting things that CCP Tuxford had mentioned is like right now, CCP are at the point where they can't just throw more money and get better hardware at the issues. Like it's not a hardware problem anymore. It's more of a software problem, if you want to call it that. Um, and you guys, what does that actually really mean?
Well, I think they allude to the fact, well, they mentioned specifically about the single-threaded nature of their code, and they did mention that they're employing strategies, not necessarily throwing hardware at it, because I think they've done that in the past, but employing strategies to minimize that or to mitigate that as much as possible. They talked about using caches. So if they cache a calculation into memory, they can reference that calculation in memory instead of having to recalculate it, and that saves on some CPU load. They also mentioned that there's game functionality that isn't on the servers specifically. It's in a database, so taking those calculations away from those single-threaded processes and moving it into the server, into the database server, so that it helps alleviate some of that load.
Yeah. Go for it.
There's lots of
Go Spot.
I just want to comment on this. It always comes up of these pipe dreams of, just make it multi-threaded. It's just it's like making a pizza. You just chuck it in the oven and push a button, and then it comes out. It's done. It's that easy. And it's not. It's almost conceptually impossible in some ways, because you have to deal with the fact that somebody has to shoot somebody else first, and if somebody blows up during that shooting, their guns can't shoot. So if I calculate everything in a crazy order, because that's what you'd have to do in multi-threading, you're calculating many things at once, you lose that order. And there are sort of ways around it, but it's an incredibly complex problem to solve that would take an ungodly amount of time and effort on the CCP's part that just ultimately probably wouldn't really be worth it.
And you have lots of calls and lots of and you have lots of calls and lots of situations in a fleet fight where a lot of things happening all pretty much almost all at the same time, but there are a bit of a degree of order going on, and as Zendaya does say, there are orders, there is that kind of order in FPSs, but as CCP had said in their stream, the big difference, they didn't say this explicitly, but I'm kind of massaging it to some degree. FPSs tend to trust the client a lot more than CCP trusts our clients for EVE Online. In actual fact, I don't think there's anything that you can send to the server that the server trusts implicitly in any way, shape, or form. Whereas if you go and play FPS game, FPSs, shooters, that kind of stuff, there is a lot of trust that happens between a server and a client, and that's where you get all of the that's basically where you find all of the cheating, all of the hacking and stuff like that. That's where the code interjection kind of occurs in that process, and that's the big difference between EVE and FPSs, because all of the network traffic that you send to a server is checked and rechecked by the server, and in that sense you can't really code hacks for EVE, because there's no just general trust of information coming from a client to a server.
I thought that was really cool.
EVE. It was really good, right?
CCP Tuxford mentioned that the whole presentation mentioned that EVE is run on a simulation, right? So the server does everything. The client does a few things, but it's stuff that you see, right? It gets all the information. It has to verify everything. So the physics engine is done on the client side, but the physical position of your ship, the server tells it where it should be,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's not like you can't really cheat the
There's
system or skirt the way any.
There's a
If
funny
you've
little
right.
anecdote on that kind of thing with the way the physics engine works in the game. Your ship does not have a direction. The direction is a lie. The way that your ship points when you look at it is a factor of its velocity. When they're actually computed on the server, they're essentially aimless dots. So it's going left at 100 meters a second. That's
So-
all the server knows and tells. And then the sort of visual takes that into account and slowly updates it for you, so you see your ship turn.
The interesting thing about that, and the way that like players kind of found that out through trial and error, was sometimes there was a period in time where if you had a bomber and you jumped into a system via a Black Ops, when you landed, you could fire off fire your bomb launcher, and your bomb would literally sit there doing nothing, because essentially
no
what would
redirection.
happen is the bomb launch would look to the direction of travel that your ship was going. Because your ship didn't really have a forward or wasn't actually going in any direction whatsoever, like it just didn't have that information, so it would sit there and like not move at all. Whereas now I think the way that they fix that is when you jump in, you do have a tiny amount of movement like added to you. So essentially bombs know which direction to go. And that doesn't occur anymore. But like, yeah, essentially you don't have a front or a back when, in terms of Eve, like from what the server, what the server kind of like views your ship to be.
I mean, that makes sense. I feel like an imaginary dot sometimes, especially in EVE Online, just going anyways. But Dr. Spot, you had a pretty cool breakdown of why multi-threading isn't just like push multi-thread, get bacon, and like super server performance. But
God, I wish it was.
Another topic I hear a lot about is like parallel processing. Is that something that's similar to multi-threading? Is it something Eve already does? Like, what does that even
It's
mean?
one and the same, I suppose. It's a different way of saying the same thing, as far as I'm aware, or at least the way I would treat it.
I mean, there's a lot of parallel processing that does go on. CCP did actually sort of mention this in their stream. There are a lot of processes that do happen in parallel on the Eve client. Like, it's just not happening from a server simulation standpoint. Like every other process that is kind of related or calls information, from databases or this, that, and the other, is happening in parallel with the kind of the simulation. But the simulation itself is single-threaded.
And
Yeah, of course, things like fetching what's going on in the system, that can be done multi-threaded. There's not a queue of X shoots Y, Z wants to know what solar system he's in, and then Jeff fires off a smart bomb. That's not all in one queue that's having to be processed.
And when they were talking about the coding, CCP Explorer had mentioned that they're trying to move everything to gRPC. What is gRPC? Like,
I was trying to Google that.
Okay, so I'm
I was
not
trying to
alone
Google.
here.
Yeah. I had no idea. Maybe Spot does. I have no idea. But like, I tried to Google it, and it didn't really get that far.
So it's a bit technical, but it's basically a communication protocol. It's part, I believe I might be kind of wrong, but there's several things that CCP are doing, both with the server and client, that involves gRPC and then something called protobuf, which is a weird techie acronym. Not an acronym, what's the word? Shortened thing for protocol buffer. And if you're familiar with something called JSON, protobuf becomes very familiar. It's basically a way of communicating data. And CCP is trying to change the way they send messages and the actual data that needs to go with them. So, like your inventory contents, for example, and the call to fetch the inventory contents. It's sort of the mechanism on the sort of network level of how that works. They're migrating to gRPC, which is just a new system for doing it. And it's more efficient, easier to use, a bit more performant, that kind of thing. It opens up quite a lot of technical backend kind of helpy things for them.
That's cool. And if anyone's asking, hey, why did they just do this before? A lot of the Eve core systems were made in 2002, and this thing's like, what, 3 years old? So that kind of explains that. it's neat to see that CCP are like following these trends as they are like becoming like new things. Like I don't know if gRPC is like industry standard for people yet, but it is
It's
neat.
like it's the cool new kid on the block, but for a good reason, because it's good.
So Eve is still the cool new kid, even though it's like a 20-year-old game, and actually has probably outlived a lot of its players at this point, which is very spooky, considering I was starting at the very start, or next to the very start.
Although Eve might be old, it's still completely fine with chilling out with the new trends, right?
Wait, Eve uses
That's
a hell of
part
a
of
lot
the
of
strategy
like,
of
cutting edge tech.
It's part of strategy getting the code off the servers. If you have work being done by the gRPC services, you have using memory caches, using a database, and not trusting the client. This is how you increase the bandwidth for our fights, by taking the load off those single nodes for the solar systems.
That is nifty. And one other thing that I might have dattled on, but didn't actually necessarily listen or get into explicitly is CCP in their presentation mentioned that they're moving a lot, or they have a lot of code in Python and a lot more new code in C++ or in C. What is the difference, and like what is the difference, and what is the significance, I guess, of changing some of their code infrastructure?
The significance is that's a huge amount of work.
Well, it's about efficiency, right?
It could be about many things: efficiency, maintainability. It could be things that it's one of those things that's kind of hard to speculate without like a first party source, because it could be efficiency, it could be some technology that they were using at some point is out of date or not supported anymore. There's a million and one reasons to update, but I suppose one of the huge ones, yes, when it comes to Python versus C++ is pure speed.
Well, Python is never. I don't think Python was ever really a thing that was, put together for speed. It was more about adaptability and sort of upgradability, right?
I'm not sure what the actual origin is of Python, but I have my own origin story in my head, my own headcanon, in that it was sort of invented for people like data scientists and more scientists in general, because it's a very readable language if you're not a programmer. So if you're a scientist but you want to be able to do some crazy tricks with your numbers and figure out some sciencey stuff, it was an easy language to get into. But it's also incredibly extensible, as you say. Like, there's the classic meme of like import gravity and then delete gravity, and now you fly off into space. It's a language that it can do almost anything anywhere. The only problem is that you get the jack of all trades effect of it's not necessarily the best tool to do that anywhere. But it's great if you want something done and you want something done now.
I also kind of feel like it's like CCP and Eve has kind of benefited from the fact that you can pull like modules apart from it and recode them, reconstitute them, rework them, put them back in, kind of thing. Almost, it's almost like I think, like, I mean, slap me down if I'm wrong there, Spot, but like it is kind of, it does work to that degree, right? Like it is kind of modular in that sense.
That's the feature of any modern language, unfortunately. That's just
okay.
Programming.
I'll shut up then.
Yeah, I think
that'd just be how it do.
Was that you could go start to finish and code something much faster than on something that requires a stricter syntax.
Okay.
If you're doing a weekend project or you need to test something, and again, like scientists who want to do something and they want a result real quick, Python is the ultimate tool for it. But it's also great for other things. It's just got that performance struggle.
Yeah, if you want to code something that has the lowest CPU usage and the lowest memory footprint, you might not choose Python.
Okay, so it's like a performance modernization type thing that they're doing, right? If I were to dumb it down as far as you could go.
So I'd like to ask Spod something. I'd like to ask Spod something. So what is the difference between Python and stackless Python?
Oh God, stuff and things.
Stuff and things. Okay.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia article right now. It's just that it handles multitasking in a different way. And well, one of the most famous users of it is Eve. I don't fully know the story behind it. I know there is, I think, a devlog or something around from many, many moons ago that does go into detail about it, but it's not something I'm that clued up on.
I'm definitely not. I'm
I
definitely
do know
not
that
like
there was a
looking
good
for
reason
that
for
blog
it,
right
but
now.
I don't know what it was. It's been spoken about in the past. I know that much. But this part of the problem that they've kind of got now is that stackless Python and Python aren't directly compatible. So there are like newer technologies and advancements and performance improvements with regular Python that just haven't quite made it to stackless yet, which is a bit frustrating, I imagine. But it's what can you do at this point? You're not going to rip out the 99% of the game's code and start again.
Actually, there was a really kind of interesting graph. I need to find it on the stream that they had, where they actually showed a graph detailing, I think it was changes to various files and the amount of code that they've had, like lines of code.
Yeah,
That was
it was
It was
interesting
somewhere
one.
there.
They
I'll
had
see.
quite
I'll
a
see if I can
spike.
find it. See if I can
and
find
you
it.
suddenly got to see all the Dust 514 players cry as you
God,
can see,
yeah,
like
delete Dust.
that giant drop that may be attributed to Dust. We're not quite sure. Tuxford wasn't 100%
Yeah,
sure
there we go.
because grabbing all that data was apparently quite taxing.
So there we go. I'm just
like,
I'm just quickly showing that graph. Like LOC, I believe, is lines of code, right? So by file type,
Yep.
and those numbers on the left, yes, those numbers are in the millions. And in actual fact, I think the top one there is 50 million lines of code. So just so you get an idea as to how many lines of code goes into, making Eve do what it does, which is pretty insane, I think.
it's crazy that they just have to find that one line that says set lag equal to 1 and make that 0 and they're good. I guess it's a lot of work to go through all those codes though. But,
They should have. I think they should have actually. They should have got in touch with Stadia to basically to get that the negative lag kind of technology that they were working on. That would have worked.
all I know is Stadia is a joke, so I knew to smile and laugh in that.
It's not a joke. I play it every day. Unironically, I play with Google Stadia every day. It's good. I'm not sponsored.
So, I mean, for when we're talking about summing this up, we don't want to go through and rehash every detail. Obviously, if you guys are more technically inclined, you can find that on the CCP Twitch page. I'm sure the VOD will be available, if not now, then soon. And I think they even cross-post it. But you can go and check that out. Again, I just wanted to sum up with our guys. Some of the big ones that stood out for me is the bounty call doesn't really affect server lag too much. It may affect other people, but not people within the fight itself, which I thought was really neat. Bosun changes coming soon, and just AoE DD changes themselves. Fix has been identified, and hopefully, one of the problems has been fixed. Hopefully, there are no other ones. But I think CCP Paradox was suggesting that we should go all and get another 6,000 man fight going and see if we can't try it again. That'll be fun. The smart bomb optimization to mass smart bombs done by CCP Habakkuk and CCP Cognac and their respective teams as well. They're not just two people sitting in isolation saying, "Yo, let me fix smart bombs, dog." And I'm sure that's not how it works. But yeah, just one last little bit. Is there anything I missed? Is there any like huge thing that stood out to you guys that you think is important for our audience to be aware of?
There was the implementation of Cloudflare, which seems to have done a touchwood good job of keeping the DDoSers at bay.
Yeah, definitely. I think they had a kind of, I think there was a bit of a touch and go implementation, when they were getting it configured initially, but like once they kind of got the golden kind of settings kind of down to a fine art, like I think it's been doing a great job.
That is great. Well, thank you so much, guys, for breaking this down for me. I really did need the help, and hopefully, people in the audience learned something as well. Again, it was very, very fascinating. Hosted by very own Carneros with CCP Tuxford, CCP Explorer, CCP Paradox, and put together by CCP Fleabix. So thank you guys, CCP, for putting that on. Hopefully, we see more of this in the future. Like I said, it's something that you would generally see at like a FanFest presentation. I know there was like a similar one by CCP Chimichanga at Vegas the last time there was a Vegas in the before times. So you can actually find that on the CCP YouTube as well. I was looking for it, but my ability to type chimichanga under stress is not very good. Again, I was joined with this with Dr. Spiderman, Araya, and McLeod. So thank you so much, guys. They also exist on the Talking Stations Discord server. If you have any other questions, I'm sure you can poke them. I'm sorry I just signed you guys up for.
I have a few things to say just before you sign off on the show. By the way,
yeah, okay, go for it.
So we have our the usual sort of daily show is happening today, so don't worry about that. Like, that is still happening. That'll be hosted by Matterall a little later on, probably I think in about 5 or 6 hours, something along those lines from now. So look for that. They'll be covering, he'll be covering the drone aggression changes and that kind of thing. Something that we didn't, but because it'll be a bit unfair for him if we covered everything, And one of the other things is, I believe Kill 2 is going to be on CCP, CCP's Twitch channel, roaming and killing things at 2200 Eve as well. So I believe that's today.
Yeah, that is, I believe it as well. CCP TV has like a whole bunch of different little shows that they do. It's always fun. Kill 2, otherwise known as CCP Rise, is long famed game developer and a great PvPer. So it's fun to see him going out there. Last week when he did the show, he was doing the robber stuff, going to ESSs and stealing from people. So that's exactly what I want to see out of my game developers. I want to see them stealing from the players. And I say that completely unironically. Like, that's one of the most endearing things I've ever seen from a video game ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks so much, guys. And like McLeod said, later today on Talking Stations and on through our YouTube, we will have our daily show hosted by Matterall, where we'll cover all the news of the day and any drone changes that you guys have been chatting about. Fortunately, it's not really in the scope of what we're doing right here. So hold all those questions for then, and we can break that down and discuss it. I can't wait. It's going to be exciting. But again, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate the help. And we'll see you tonight.